We're also joined by Adam
Brilliant.
back. Adam, do you want to just say hello, say hi, say something nice about Bitcoin, say hello?
Hi. I guess you guys are hanging out for the halving. It's going a bit faster than expected, huh?
Yeah, we're down to 6 blocks. We had
turn on the
a
Blockstream mining pool again, Adam?
Sorry, say that again?
Did you turn on the Blockstream mining pool on Superpower again? Is there another
Oh, no.
facility?
Hello, Adam, back.
see.
Hello.
So what are you looking forward to, Adam, for the, I mean, because obviously these halvenings are kind of like a point in history where you have the pre-halvening and then post-halvening. So post-halvening now, going into the next 4 years, what are you looking forward to seeing happen in the Bitcoin infrastructure?
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next, I don't know, rest of the year, I guess, in terms of the halving being priced in. People are have different views about whether it can be priced in, whether it is priced in. It's not long now, but I think because it's emergent, we won't know until afterwards. So it'll be interesting to see the economic effects of it, of course. And a short-term thing, maybe over the next 2 to 3 weeks, is what happens with the hash rate and a difficulty adjustment. So I'm supposing that the hash rate will fall a bit unless the price does something dramatic. Just looking at the numbers.
It also seemed like we saw an inflation in the hash rate. We've had some very fast blocks. This show is accelerating like crazy. I imagine everyone turned on all their old mining machines to try to get the last of these 12.5 reward blocks. And once it's gone, I imagine the same guys are running through their offices, turning off those old mining machines.
Yeah, I guess unlike usually, I mean, usually once a difficulty adjustment's happened, you're, if the hash rate changes, it doesn't make a difference. The blocks come faster. But as the halving is partway through this difficulty adjustment, of course, the profitability is going to change drastically in an hour or so now. So that might cause some sudden change in hash rate, all right?
Yeah, actually, Adam, a question here. When is the difficulty adjustment? How many blocks after the halvening?
I think it's about halfway through. I'm not sure offhand. You presumably just figure it out, divide 630,000 by 2016, see the remainder.
Looking at the last halvening, there was a bit of a spike around up to 1.8 exahash, which is like, whoa, a lot less than now. It's a bit of a spike up just before or around the halvening, but there wasn't really a dump in the hash rate. It seemed to kind of continue oscillating along the same trend line.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. I mean, so I checked. So the remainder, 630,000 mod 2016 is 1,008. So it's exactly halfway through the difficulty adjustment period. So, of course, the blocks may slow down if the hash rate falls due to profitability change there. So it may take more than a week to get to the adjustment. But at this point, the difficulty adjustment sort of prediction sites, which is looking at the rate of the block production, are predicting a 5% increase, but I'm presuming that won't actually be the case. It will, because the second half of the period will be a lot lower hash rate. But I mean, I think you got a preview of it because 22nd of March difficulty adjustment, difficulty fell to 95 exahash, and the average price in the 2 weeks before that was about 6,200. So that during that period, there was a brief point below 4,000, but it really didn't last very long. So that was enough to cause the price to fall. But of course, as we saw, it immediately grew again to 120 exahash or something. So this halving the amount of bitcoins, even at 8,500 or 10,000, I think, it's probably enough to cause the difficulty to fall.
Unless someone whips out a new miner, like or just in time for the halvening.
Time to plug in all your USBs, yeah.
I mean, there's a bunch of new equipment that's more efficient, but I don't. It's hard to tell the what percentage of the hash rate is running which type of equipment, and some of the new stuff is under 50 joules, and some of the older stuff that's still running now is 100 joules. So there's a big difference there. So I guess in a way we might be about to find out, because if everybody with 100 joule equipment ends up switching off, or at least people without fixed price power or profit share or extremely low power costs, may end up having to switch that off.
Adam, if you could speculate for the next halvening period, do you think we will see a good open source hardware Bitcoin miner?
I don't know. I think it's difficult to get open chips because some parts of the ASIC design are covered by patents. Not so much. There's the ASIC boost patent that got released under open license, but within the silicon level, the foundries have a lot of patents on different aspects of circuits. So I guess there are probably open VHDL, which is a kind of high-level programming language for the circuit logic. But below that, there's a lot of analog design stuff, and I think it's harder to get that open. But a circuit board, you could have an open circuit board that takes a given ASIC.
Just a quick update. We've found another block. There are 5 blocks remaining. Keeping an eye on the pool. Let's see who found this one. Refreshing. It was found by F2 Pool at 11:28 a.m. That's about 12 minutes after the previous block. So we're running at a 12-minute block. Go ahead, Max. What do you think? Open source?
Surely the fabrication process would be the hardest part about doing something open source. You'd have to have a lot of kind of money behind you to reserve TSMC or whoever's creating the chips, because there's a lot of competition as there is already. So it's like it's something that would be very difficult for to compete with the big players. I think, in fact, if I read rightly, Intel have just booked out TSMC's fabbing process for 5 nanometer for the whole of 21, in a stump to trying to stump AMD. So open source competition with some of the biggest miners currently will be pretty hardcore.
Well, competition is good. More miners. That'd be nice. I mean, it's definitely there are more competitors now than there were a couple of years ago when Bitmain was in the kind of peak of the political battles. When there's a number of new manufacturers like MicroBT, who have some pretty efficient equipment now.
So when is Blockstream going to be releasing the mining Dyson sphere?
Well, the launch costs are the problem for now, right?
Maybe you can team up with Elon Musk for a space elevator or something.
Yeah.
I like
Speaking about the space, what about that second version of the Blockstream satellite protocol? That's huge.
Yeah, so that's been we've been optimizing that in the background for quite a while to get the to be able to send enough data to do a full sync, basically. So as it says, it's 25 times, I think maybe slightly more, like 27, 28 times as much data you can send through it as the previous one, but the actual increase in frequency is 300 up to 1.2. So 300 kilohertz up to 1.2 megahertz. So it's only 4 times more bandwidth, but the rest comes from different levels of optimization. So one is switching to DVB S2 standard, which is kind of digital streaming standard that's part of the MPEG satellite streaming protocols. That gives quite a bit of extra reliability, a bit more throughput. We reduce the error correction overhead, and also some lossless compression. So Peter Wall and Arvid Norberg made a kind of transaction compressor that I think gets about average 15% size reduction in Bitcoin transactions. So it's not, it's not looking at a lot of context. It's looking at an individual Bitcoin transaction, and it can compress that by 15%. So if you add up all the different factors, you get over 25 times smaller. And another difference is this new setup can receive data from 2 different satellites, and we're sending different data streams on different satellites. So there are 3 different areas which have coverage from 2 different satellites. And so they are broadcasting sort of 50% out of sync. So one of them is starting at the beginning for the full history, and the other one's starting at the midpoint. And so if you have a double dish setup, then you'll get into 2 parts. When it comes, when it's got all of them, then it will process them. And you can jump in anywhere because it's broadcasting in the loop. So whenever you start, when you process blocks, you have to do it from the beginning. So if you're probably not going to be at the beginning, so you just store them on disk until you get wraparound, and then it will start syncing. And if you have 2 dishes, it will do it twice. So if you get the 2 dishes in there, it's like 50 times as much throughput, which is fun. It's a lot. That's a big difference.
Have you done any experimentation? With the little lock-on dishes you can get on top of camper vans for getting Sky TV? Is there any of those which you've done? Have you done any experimentation with those, like locking onto the Blockstream satellite?
We haven't, but you should be able to. And actually, we have a steerable dish at the uplink. So where the intelligence on the satellite is on the ground. So there's a ground station. Well, there's 2 ground stations. One of the ground stations has a 9-meter, 27-foot dish, but it also has a steerable dish to point at the other satellites. So if the internet connection goes down at the west uplink, it can point the steerable dish, that's a smaller dish, at the east, one of the east satellites, and take the data from there. So basically, if the internet connection went down on the west satellite, on the west uplink, the data would go up from the east to the satellite, down to the west, and then up again to Europe and Asia. So you get kind of, the latency would go up because it'd be going down and up again. But yeah, you get steerable dishes will do it, and that's just a fixed steerable dish. But the RV and like recreational vehicle, camping steerable dishes, and the marine steerable dishes, you can get equipment to do that.
They're pretty high spec as well, like the receiver rate. Like they're good dishes. They're not cheap. I can because I've been seriously thinking about getting one and trying to get it to home in and find the Blockstream. But I wasn't sure whether it was even possible. So I didn't even want to try and experiment and buy one without There's some glimmer of a hope that it may work. But now you've given me that glimmer of a hope. I'll happily go and buy a steerable automatic dish and then drive down the motorway, locking onto the Blockstream satellite.
Well, so one thing to bear in mind is there's 2 data streams. There's so it's broadcasting 2 different channels, kind of, but it's within the same DVB-S2 stream, they're just time division multiplexed. But anyway, the receiving equipment understands this and can receive both of them or one of them. And the high bandwidth one is for block history, and the low bandwidth one is for the current stuff, which is the last 24 hours in a loop and the current transactions as well. So that you need a 60 centimeter dish to get the high bandwidth one, whereas the low bandwidth one, you could use a 45 centimeter dish. So on the steerable dishes, it depends how big they are, or if they're somehow uprated, even though they're smaller than 60.
Yeah, they are. There's some weird design things going on to kind of make them, cover.
Right. And the other thing is the flat panels. So we're selling flat panel dishes, which I think are a little bit easier to point. So they can adjust a little bit because it's kind of antenna array. So it can correct a little bit of inaccurate pointing within reason. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to compliment you on a tweet that you recently did that I retweeted, and maybe you could outline that to the viewers here, because it really helped me understand the advantages of liquidity and Lightning Network and Bitcoin. And I forgot just how you laid that out, but it was just very well laid out, very simple to understand, and it was a great teaching mechanism. Would you mind sharing that with the audience?
Oh, I think you're talking about the one which was sort of comparing the trade-offs between Bitcoin main chain and the different layers, Lightning versus Liquid. And
Liquid and Lightning.
Right, exactly. So I was just, people were saying, oh, this one's trusted, this one's trustless. And I was like, yeah, it's not so simple. So I think I would, even though it's true, I mean, clearly the main chain is going to be the best for censorship resistance and cold storage, and anything you do on a layer 2 that would make that better, Bitcoin would have already done that, right? So the main chain is where it's at for censorship resistance and cold storage. But as we know, Lightning is faster and cheaper and more scalable, but it does make trade-offs, right? It has a hot wallet, it has a reactive security model, so you have to watch or have a watchtower watching, and if you get denial of service or you don't keep up with that, you could lose money. So the combination of the reactive security model and the hot wallet means that I would not want to put a lot of money in Lightning. Maybe as much as you put on a smartphone wallet or in a cash in your paper wallet, that there's a risk that you break the phone or drop the wallet on the street or something. So actually, but then there's the other question, which is, what's the risk that there's a kind of policy issue? So so with Liquid, I would say that's higher security because there's a federation of HSMs. The Bitcoins can't get sent out of it except to cold wallets. So you're relying on exchanges to kind of manually, to give you their hot wallet coins and then replenish it from the cold wallet. So I would say that Liquid is higher security than Lightning, but Lightning has got lower trust requirements because the federation, if something went wrong in a big way, could suspend operations. And, then that might result in your funds being jammed up. Or if there was something very bad that happened in the trading circles, maybe a trade could at the worst get undone or something. I don't know. It's hard to imagine the scenario that would cause this, but clearly there's some element of trust because unlike with mining, where there's an anonymous set of miners, with Liquid, it's a set of exchanges. So I think it seemed to surprise people that one could claim Liquid was higher security, but less kind of peer-to-peer trustless, but still somewhat peer-to-peer trustless. And also that Liquid was more private than Lightning on the main chain because of the confidential transactions. So they had a better way of summarizing it in a
Yeah,
tweet.
maybe
but
we can screen share that tweet because, I mean, you just explained a very difficult concept, but your tweet made it so simple. Yeah, and I could, you know what I'm saying? If I listen to your conversation, it's hard to follow, but I understand it because of the beauty of how you tweeted it and kept it simple. I can't screen share, but maybe Thomas.
Somebody's put something in.
It taught me so much. It was just a great tweet.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think what I did is I sorted them by which is most trustless, which is most secure, and which is most private. And it maybe wasn't what people were expecting. So for security, I would say Bitcoin comes first, then Liquid, then Lightning. And for trustlessness, I'd say that's Bitcoin main chain, then Lightning, then Liquid. And for privacy, it's probably Liquid, then Lightning, then Bitcoin. So they're all in a different sequence, right? So
do you think so? Like
yeah.
a way of people being able to get the value from each of those different networks easier, like interoperability and things like channel factories, and to easily loop in and out of main chain, on chain, and Lightning, or have sort of Lightning on top of Liquid. I suppose you would still then have the issue with the
Well,
federation.
there is Lightning on top of Liquid. I don't know if you knew that, but
Yeah, I did. It's super cool.
Yeah.
And like I want to see more experimentation with it.
Yeah, I mean, so that's an interesting fact as well, because maybe Lightning on top of Liquid has some advantages in privacy and channel opening and closing speed, and the fact that you have to trust it a little bit more than the main chain. My argument was as well that maybe people don't care as much about trustlessness if it's spending money, because it's not like it's their savings or their and so if there is scalability or cost or privacy advantages, maybe they would use it. And
what you don't want is for people to obviously have to spend a lot of money to be able to go off chain, which would be a scenario which would happen now if suddenly the fees on Bitcoin on chain would go up and everyone had to start using Lightning a lot more. So it's that, like, being able to shift between the different networks, which seems to me like the play, and the thing we should be working towards.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping there will be. I'm hoping there would be more layer twos in time. I mean, there's also the
that's true,
state chains, and I think there's probably space for even more layer twos.
Adam, why not, or what do you think, value shuffle ++ on the Liquid network?
Yeah, that'd be nice. I mean, somebody's got to do it, right? But I think one of the very nice things about confidential transactions is that coin joins become perfect. Like, it's very easy to coin join. You don't have to match amounts. Every coin join is ambiguous as to, regardless of the amounts. And in Liquid, you actually have different types as well. So you can't always tell whether an asset is a Bitcoin or a Tether or something else.
All right, see if I'm smart. I pulled it up. I just don't know if I know how to screen share.
Oh, we've got it now. Is it
a good? Yes, here. I think I got it now. Let's see if this is it.
Thomas has it.
Oh, we've got it.
Oh,
It's
Thomas. Yeah, show it.
if you just
want to
because read it, code. It just says
Bitcoin. It
Bitcoin.
so simply.
It says Bitcoin versus layer 2. I think we have an echo. Yeah, go. You need headphones, man. Let's see. So Bitcoin versus layer 2. Liquid versus Lightning is not a one-dimensional comparison. Security. Bitcoin is greater than Liquid. Liquid is greater than Lightning. Lightning's greater than an exchange /trust /uncensorable, unseizable. Bitcoin's greater than Lightning, Lightning's greater than Liquid, Liquid's greater than an exchange on trust. But on confidentiality, Liquid is greater than Lightning, Lightning is greater than Bitcoin. On speed, Lightning is greater than Liquid, and Liquid is greater than Bitcoin. Is that the tweet you're looking for, Ugly?
That's nice.
You got to unmute again. There you go.
There too, and just it just kind of opened my eyes up. I said, "Oh wow, that's it." And so I wanted to thank you for that tweet because you really educated me with that.
Well, it came after a period of some debate, and I finally got sick of it, and I tried to organize the thoughts a bit more clearly.
Was it a please refer to this tweet moment? So when someone wants to have that debate with you, you're like, okay.
Well, it got a bit circular, really, because people were arguing that Liquid is an IOU, which I think is significantly underselling what it is. I mean, it's not simple. I mean, each new layer has different properties, and people have researched them a bit, understand what the properties are and the differences are. But when people try and break it down and say it's an IOU or it's custody or something, I don't think it is really those things, because those things have specific meanings, really. So I just try to summarize the properties as an alternative.
Yeah, I mean, I think that people quite like the idea of having competing second layers, and they were like, well, Liquid's better than Lightning, or Lightning's better than Liquid. And I think it's very wise to point out that they've both got benefits and trade-offs, just like using Bitcoin itself, I suppose. So no, it's nice to hear. I'll have to find that tweet myself and refer people to it.
So Adam, 2 questions in the group. So the first one, you touched on it briefly. You mentioned state change, so from by Ruben, and there's also RGB, which I know it was mentioned briefly on the panel at TCConf. So how does state change and RGB fit in? And then another question was also about DEXs settling on Lightning Network. So from Roxana, so what do you think about DEX settlements on Lightning?
So, I mean, RGB is basically color coins for Lightning. And so it's, I mean, one of the sort of downsides to color coins is that every color coin transaction is a Bitcoin transaction. So doing that in a Lightning friendly way at least reduces the overhead a bit. But I presume you're still going to need a hot wallet. So I'm not sure it's ideal for trading. And the other downside of Lightning for trading as compared to Liquid is that you can you tend to run out of channel capacity. So I think Lightning is better for sort of retail payments. I mean, the problem, if you look at it from an exchange point of view, a big exchange might have 100,000 users, and let's say they've got 100,000 Bitcoin. That's a lot. It's like 1 Bitcoin average per user. So now what are they going to do if they put 1 Bitcoin on a channel to each user, and they've got a big Lightning hub, which is the exchange, and then one user transfers in $100,000 and buys 10 Bitcoins and expects to withdraw it, it's immediately going to fail the channel because it's going to be bigger than the channel. And so I think generally the pattern of transacting or withdrawing on exchanges is unpredictable and spiky. So it's difficult to use Lightning. But in principle, RGB is a bit more decentralized because it has more of a Lightning security model. And then state chains is another interesting one by Ruben Summerson. So it's it's a strange threat model because you're assuming that the people operating the state chain, which could be a single server or a federation, are honest, but could be coerced to steal the funds. And so they're not able to steal the funds if they're honest. But if they're dishonest, they could just take the funds. So you're trusting them to not steal, but you're not having to trust them to not get forced or, receive demands to seize funds. And the reason that they could seize funds if they were dishonest is they can be part of the transaction history. And if that's the case, they can kind of cheat the protocol and take the funds. And state chains have some other interesting side effects, like you have to transfer. It's sort of got like a setup procedure where you take a Bitcoin on the main chain and you put it into a state chain, but you can't, unlike with Lightning, where you can subdivide the coins, or with Liquid, where you can move around different amounts of liquid Bitcoin. With state chains, you have to move the whole UTXO, and so that's a bit inconvenient as well.
So they do have less of a liquidity problem than Lightning because of the symbol size of channels, the average channels. Is that right?
The state chains, I guess it should be not exactly hot wallet either. So you could have bigger coins, but you can't subdivide them. So I don't know what you're going to do. Like pick a size and use lots of them. I think the main advantage is that it has some enhanced privacy while you're using it. I think that's the point of it, is to try and get privacy on this state chain with blind signing or something.
Yeah. We're down,
So
I think, with three blocks to go also.
Oh yeah, cool. So I mean, just different as a differentiator, I think state chains is trying to get towards a privacy focused sidechain like thing. It's not a sidechain, it's not a Lightning channel, that's something else. But it has a honest server assumption, but it gives you a slight improvement over a federated sidechain, because as long as they're honest, they can't be asked to seize, whereas an honest sidechain federation could be asked to seize.
Adam, I'd just like to say thanks for your help with TCConf, and also a quick question for you: what development are you looking most forward to in Bitcoin?
So, well, the thing I presented about at TCConf, simplicity, I think that's pretty interesting, and hopefully eventually comes to Bitcoin itself. But for the short term, it's in Elements as a developer release, and we're hoping to get it into Liquid for full use late this year. So it's a sort of general smart contracting for Bitcoin, but done in a way that is soft forkable and uses the UTXO model, but adds a lot more flexibility, soft extensibility, and formal proofs, so that you can prove the semantics about more complicated programs.
What was the language? Wasn't the programming the language used for the simplicity smart contracting? Is it simpler or?
Well, so after people have listened to that talk, and there's been a few versions of that talk as we try to make it understandable, because it brings in some esoteric niche areas of programming, of formal proof systems and things. The average response has been simplicity isn't simple. So
yeah, it's funny.
but what the simplicity refers to is the semantics. So the point is, at the lowest level, it's a kind of functional language with some very low level operators that are things like sort of like a level of Boolean and concatenating bit strings and stuff like that. So sort of very low level things. It doesn't even have a 32-bit adder. You'd have to build that out of these kind of ifs and ands and concatenations and things. And so the point about the simplicity is that there are only 9 operators, and if you get a description of them, you'll quickly feel you know exactly what the operator does. So it has very clear semantics. And then from those, you can build up arbitrary programs. Of course, that happens by building 32-bit adders and hash functions and elliptic curve libraries, and just access to a lot of different libraries that do common things. So you would actually end up probably programming it in a higher level language eventually. But at this, at the bottom level, it's kind of machine code with a functional logic, semantics.
Was this to kind of give people a smaller envelope, design envelope, and then let it people grow it in the direction they want to grow it in? Like, why was that design choice made to keep it simple and have just 9 operators?
It's in order to help the formal proof system. So in order for a proof assistant, which is a software package to assist in proving semantics about software, in order to give it something that it can understand and reason about, you need to have formal definition of what the semantics of the language are. And so by keeping it simple, it becomes easier to write that interpreter and have the definitions that you can plug into a proof assistant. So it has some interesting properties as a result, one of which is that there is a simplicity interpreter written in Coq, that's C-O-Q, and there's a formal proof that the interpreter will correctly interpret all simplicity programs, which is a kind of a strong claim to be able to make about an interpreter. For example, we don't know that the C compiler is correct. Will the C compiler correctly interpret all C programs? Probably not. There are probably bugs in it. Will the Bitcoin script interpreter correctly interpret all Bitcoin scripts? We hope so, but we can't prove it. But with simplicity, we can prove it. And then there's another mechanism to do things more efficiently. So there's a C interpreter as well. And there's a system for proving C code as well. That's the Verifiable C project from Princeton. And with that, you can prove the equivalence of the C interpreter with the Coq interpreter of simplicity. So given that you have these sort of provable semantics for the Coq implementation of the simplicity interpreter, and then you've got another proof, which is that the C implementation is equivalent in all circumstances to the Coq implementation, then you have at the end a formal proof that the C implementation correctly interprets all simplicity programs, which is pretty amazing, right? Very few C programs have that, have any kind of guarantee of behavior.
Nice. So it's a good bedrock to build from.
Yeah,